Hello, my learning friends, and welcome to some U.S. history. We got a bloody one on for you today. It's violent, it's gruesome, and I heard the kiddies like that. We're going to take a look at the caning of Charles Sumner by one Preston Brooks on the floor of the Senate, going back to May 22nd, 1856. So what are we waiting for? Why don't we go giddy up for the learning and get her done right now. A little bit of context before we get to the bloody beating on the floor of the Senate. You have to put this in context because in 1856 you had the passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This was a law which sought for the expansion of slavery into Kansas, which was north of the Missouri Compromise line, so it's kind of shifting the whole conversation about where slavery is going to be allowed. Now, there were two authors of that bill. One of them was Stephen Douglas from Illinois, and the other one was Andrew Butler from South Carolina. So this was something that really angered Northern abolitionists, and that's who Charles Sumner is. He's a Northern abolitionist, branding himself now as a Republican, this newly formed party, and he's about to give a big speech. It's actually such a long speech. It's a two-day speech that he gave on May 19th and May 20th, and it's called The Crime Against Kansas. So why don't we hear at least a portion of that speech? So the beginning of the speech was just a full-throttled attack on the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and he's really talking about slavery not as in a constitutional sense, but in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence as an evil, as a stain on the country, and we're going to bring this barbaric practice to the virgin soil of Kansas. How dare we? Now, after attacking the Kansas-Nebraska Act, he's going to go on to attack the co-authors of that piece of legislation. We're going to save off the language against Stephen Douglas, but I remember the words like that, and bald and ugly. It was pretty personal, but he's going to really take an attack at Butler, who he had a personal beef with because they were rude to each other on the floor. It was said that Butler would accuse Sumner of wanting basically to have sex with black women and kind of vice versa. So it was kind of a sexual connotation underneath these assaults, and that brings us to this part of the speech where he's going to go after Butler. The senator from South Carolina has read many books of chivalry and believes himself a chivalrous knight with sentiments of honor and courage. Of course, he has chosen a mistress to whom he has made his vows, and who, though ugly to others, is always lovely to him. Though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste in his sight. I mean the harlot slavery. For her his tongue is always profuse in words. Let her be impeached in character, or any proposition made to shut her out from the extension of her wantonness, and no extravagance of manner or hardihood of assertion is then too great for this senator. Doh, mic drop! And then he goes on, and now I'm going to preface this by saying Butler had recently had a stroke which affected his speech, so Sumner is going to aim it right at that. He touches nothing which he does not disfigure with error, sometimes of principle, sometimes of fact. He cannot open his mouth, but out there flies a blunder. Oh, mic drop, making fun of someone's handicap. Yeah, Sumner really took it personal. Even Stephen Douglas, who was listening to the speech and was actually one of the focuses of the hate of the speech, when he hears the part about Butler, he says to his colleague, this damn fool is going to get himself killed by another damn fool. And even though Butler wasn't on the floor to hear that speech, his second cousin was. And this is maybe the honorable representative from South Carolina, Preston Brooks. And he wants to restore the dignity of his fine name in politics and his second cousin, Senator Butler. So first he approaches Lawrence Keitt, another House member from the South, and he says, why don't I give this guy a duel, old-fashioned duel style? And Lawrence Keitt basically tells him he's below a duel, that a duel is only between two men of honorable class, and Sumner is nothing but a drunkard. He doesn't deserve that, and they agree that what he does need is a public beating, and that's what's going to occur. So Henry Edmondson and Lawrence Keitt and Preston Brooks head over to the Senate on May 22nd, 2 days after that speech, and they sit in the gallery watching Senate business, and when it concludes, they wait for everybody to kind of wander away, and Preston Brooks, with his big, thick Gouda Percha cane with a big gold top, walks right up to Sumner, who's sitting at his desk on the Senate floor, and says something to the effect of, sir, I have read your speech 2 times carefully, and I find it to be a libel against South Carolina and a libel against my family name. And as Sumner stands to respond, Preston Brooks hits him right over the head, cracks his skull open, and Sumner falls to the floor, kind of getting wedged between the chair and his desk as Brooks just goes to town. He tried to crawl away. Sumner had blood all over his face. He was in and out of consciousness as he's trying to stumble up the Senate aisle. Other senators who were trying to come to his rescue were stopped by Henry Edmondson, who was brandishing a pistol and basically said, "You're going to let this happen." It only lasted for about 60 seconds, but Preston Brooks was able to hit him 30 times in the back, in the neck, in the face, on the head, hitting him so hard that he actually shattered the cane. At the end of the episode, Brooks is going to just walk away casually while Sumner is going to be rushed to medical services. Now let's take a look at the day after and the years after. So the effect of the caning of Charles Sumner, well, effect number one is he's going to have a big bump on his head. He actually had trauma for the rest of his life, head trauma, migraines, he had post-traumatic stress syndrome, and he actually had to take 3 years off from the Senate, although he held that position in order to recuperate. Mr. Brooks is going to, first, they're going to try to censor him in the House. He's going to resign his position because of it, but then he's going to run to fill his own position, and he's going to win. See, the bigger idea was that this really split the country violently into these two forces. These forces of Southern interests that stood behind Brooks, that saw any attack on slavery an attack on all Southerners and on their heritage, and really is going to rally abolitionists, and it's going to make Sumner a martyr in the North. If anything is going to expand the Republican Party and coalesce it around some ideas of at least, free labor, it's going to be the caning of Charles Sumner. And of course, the Civil War is not long after. Now, Mr. Brooks is going to fade into obscurity because he's going to die not long after. He ended up with some kind of neck-lung infection, died a horrible death. And Sumner is going to continue. He's going to end up being a very important voice as a radical Republican during Reconstruction. And that's about it. So now you know about the bloody beating of Charles Sumner. So you want to learn some other stuff? Why don't you head over to www.hiphughes.com, check out the video arsenal. We have over 450 videos that are organized for your learning pleasure. How about that? And if you haven't subscribed, I don't even want to look at you. I'm going to look right there, not even at the camera because I can't look at your face anymore. Why don't you subscribe because it's the right thing to do. And always remember, my friends, because I say it at the end of every lecture because I mean it with all my heart, where attention goes, energy flows. And we'll see you, friends, next time that you press my buttons.